Welcome, everyone. Today, we're going to be talking about performance appraisals. But before you decide to unsubscribe from my podcast, just hang on. Certainly in my time in HR, I've heard and read some pieces from up-and-coming companies trying to push organizations to more regular performance conversations, not just the annual process. And I finally found someone that I know from my background who's actually done this with this company. So with me today is JD Slaughter from Huge, and he is going to talk to us a little bit today about Huge's journey down that path. Welcome, JD.
Thanks, Ken. Yeah, super excited to be here.
Awesome. So before we really get into what I know will be a fun topic for me and you, and at least my two aunts who listen to the podcast, want you first to sort of talk to our audience. Give us sort of your career journey. Would love to hear how you, where you started, how you landed into what you're doing today.
Yeah, for sure. So I started thinking I was going to be a teacher, and quickly moved into consulting. I joined a sort of smallish team within Korn Ferry. This was in 2011 or so. I was part of their government consulting team. And within Korn Ferry, I made a move to an internal team focused on, building scalable consulting solutions across the organization. And
I think I know of that team.
You may. Couple sort of SWAT-like initiatives as well that we got parachuted into, which was a lot of fun. Incredible team, incredible mentors, amazing boss. And when I left Korn Ferry, I did a short stint with a company called CEB, was once corporate executive board, then acquired by Gartner. Also as a consultant there, working in marketing, talent development, specifically, before I quite literally stumbled across this role at Huge. And at the time that I applied, it was a talent partner role for their DC office. So I moved internal HR and HRBP for our DC office, expanded to our Southeast region, and then transitioned to help effectively found our org effective and organizational development capability and practice within the organization. And I've been in that role for, I feel like 3 years now.
Nice.
Yes. And yeah, been with Huge about 8.5 years. Love it. Amazing company, amazing culture. Can't get enough.
Awesome. Yeah. So for the listener, JD and I first met on that second team at Korn Ferry that I was talking about, and mentioned a great boss. Shout out Chuck Grant. Agreed. Great boss and friend to this day. So you spent some time on the outside before the inside, and for anyone who doesn't understand my lingo, external consulting before going into HR. What do you feel like you were able to take from external consulting into the HR role? Is that too big of a question?
No, I don't think so. I think one really interesting thing is that, and this is not to belittle or diminish any of our clients who thought they were super unique, but nothing is actually that unique. Where a lot of the problem statements and challenges that we're trying to solve as consultants for our clients, and even internal, talent practitioners are seemingly very similar. It's really, the culture itself that might be the unique part, and how we're going to get things to work within the context of that organization and that organization's people and where their business is. I think that's probably the unique part. And it took me a little while, candidly, at Huge to really figure that part out and not go straight to, Korn Ferry training in the moment. It's like, this is a very different culture and context, and we have to figure out how to make those things work here and in the ways that mean something for Huge. So I don't know if that answers the question, but
it does. Yeah. No, what I would say from my own experience, having gone external to internal, I echo that. Right. And I'll be more I'll be specific on two parts. One part generalization, one part picking on companies a little bit too. But
Okay.
the generalization is leadership, and there's not like there's are very common leader. Most of the leadership challenges, probably 98%, are common across the board,
Mhm.
regardless of what your company and your context might be. Um, so to your point, like there's a lot of feelings of uniqueness, but actually a lot of commonality. And I saw that firsthand when I was at Buffalo Wild Wings. So we would bring in, restaurant tours, so to speak, like, the general managers with corporate managers, general managers of stores with corporate managers. And they'd be, by about an hour or two into these programs, they'd be shocked that they had the exact same problems that they were dealing with. Right. The other part where I'm going to pick on companies, my favorite thing, having been in a few different companies in HR roles, is the one thing I've heard in the first week of all of those experiences: we're a relationship based company. I'm like, oh, yes, you're the only one. It's like,
That's exactly right.
I joke, but I don't think any company is not. I think every company is a relationship
Totally.
based company.
Agreed.
All right, one more question before we dive into our topic. Now, if you were to go into consulting again
Mhm.
tomorrow, what do you think you would be taking from your HR experience into external consulting
Uh, um, that every company's really unique.
again?
Yes. No. Let's see.
See you all next time, folks.
I think so. So one of the reasons I wanted to move internal
Mhm.
from consulting was I really wanted to be part of what's next. So instead of delivering the thing or the change management or whatever it is, the new process or approach or the talent management structure or the competency model, whatever it is,
Mhm.
and help embed it. I wanted to be part of everything that happens after that and get to
Right.
see it in action and course correct and shift our entire model or change whatever it had to be.
Yep.
Um, and I really missed that part in consulting. So often it's like
Yeah.
the engagement ends and you don't really, you hope it works, but you don't really get to see or be part of it. And I
Right.
really wanted to see and be part of those things.
Yeah.
And so I, I think coming into it knowing that no matter what ultimately you deliver, it's going to begin to take the shape of the org that it's in.
Yeah.
And being, I think, really intentional about how you can create the space for that to happen. It's like some of these models or approaches are so rigid, if you will. It's like
Mhm.
this is the way we do this, and we're gonna customize it for your unique culture. But it's like this is the way we do this, and it doesn't have the sort of soft edges that for it to really, I think, become part of an organization's culture or part of the organization. Those things have to
Yeah.
soften just a little bit. And so I guess for myself, if I was to move back into consulting, it's, we've got our methodologies and our approach and our philosophy, and how do we make sure that the edges aren't too sharp that a
Mm.
company can't actually do anything with it when we leave.
Right. Yes. Yeah, I like that. Personally, I've found, since I've made the transition out of HR, that it's really, what I've been able to bring back into it is really subtle.
Mm.
Um, right. I'm it primarily because I now know what's happening behind the scenes. I know what real life looks like
Yes.
for the HR people I'm
Spot on.
working with, for the leaders that I'm working with. So my ability now to take what in hindsight was probably a pretty academic understanding, um, and solid, the training and
Sure.
sort of mentoring we had at PDI and Korn Ferry was really strong. So I'm not um, trying to do a disservice to that.
Totally.
Just my ability to bring it to life is so much stronger now. Not to toot my own horn, but
Uh,
just I can feel it now. Like
no,
I can
I
feel it. I know what I'm. Yeah.
I love that. And I think it really probably more accurately describes even what I was trying to suggest because I've gotten feedback from my boss at Huge that sometimes I can bring things that she says it probably looked really great in the lab.
Yeah.
And yeah, might be a bit too academic, might be, but but operationalizing it and making it come to life at huge, that it presents different challenges for sure.
Yeah.
And I think that's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about bringing something to life, right? So I think you and I were chatting about various things we could talk about today. So for the listener, I'm just going to lean right into it and say we were talking about your Edge leadership program, and you were talking me through a really cool. Maybe we'll have you on another day and we'll talk about that. But you were talking me through this, and I was asking you about how you measured results, and you started to say, well, essentially, like, well, that really comes from our quarterly performance process that we've implemented and the data we can get. And I nearly fell off my chair, and I was like, that's what we should talk about. Let's talk about that. And so while I think the annual performance appraisal process is um, loved by few, loathed by many, a necessary part of the rhythm of most organizations. Like I said at the beginning, I've heard of this approach to trying to have more real time, regular performance conversations instead of it always being the one time event at the end of the year. And I know that you've been going down that road. So I'd love to hear about where did that begin for you all at Huge, and what did you do, and how did you get to where you are with it today?
So there's a couple things that I might suggest were the genesis for really exploring it. And one of those things was the simple fact of what you mentioned already, that people hate it. Like, people hate going through the annual review process, and it's not just you know managers and individual contributors and people outside of HR. HR hates annual reviews too. It's like, nobody wants to be constantly reminding people to do it. Desperately trying to track down people who haven't shared their feedback or completed that form yet, or the manager that still hasn't written the final review or given the ratings. It's like it's a hassle for everybody.
Yeah.
And not only that, it's an incredible amount of time that the organization is spending away from the business. Like, we
Yeah.
estimated at Huge, I think this was in 2002, that we spent somewhere between 5,000 and 6,000 hours for a
Oh my God.
relatively small company. We're about
Yeah.
900,000 people at the time. 6,000 hours at the end of the year for reviews. And it's like, that's a critical time for the business, the end of the year and the beginning of the year. I mean, there's no time that's not, but especially those points. So how can we not only think differently about, right, what can we do that people don't hate, and what can we also do that is not costing the business space, time, money, all of those
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
And
Well, I
that,
think one thing, if I can interrupt, one thing that you also mentioned was based on Huge's design, and
Mhm.
how you're kind of project based, right? So people swarm a project.
Yep.
There's various layers of people and roles that people are playing, and then that project comes to an end, and they're on to the next thing. And I think what we were talking about is you get to the end of the year, and now you're trying to chase down feedback from 60 people from 5, 6 different projects you
Yeah,
did over 12 months, right? And
exactly.
that created, some challenge for you all
Yep.
just based on how your company operates.
Yep. And that was really the third thing. So
Oh,
we just,
sorry.
no,
You were
no,
getting there.
no, not at all. That it's an annual review, or even, if you do a, mid-year cycle also, that those two
Mhm.
things were not serving our people in the way that they work. It was really, really challenging for someone to think about feedback they're going to share with someone they were on a project with for 3 months, 2 months back in January. We're now in
Mhm.
December. Sometimes we're even a year later already. It might be January
Yeah.
when they're getting ready to write that feedback. And it's just not a way to capture anything that's not riddled with bias, or anything
Mhm.
that isn't that's accurate. It's really, really challenging. And so that again created a barrier for our people to give really good feedback, and for our people to get really good feedback, which then created a whole host of other challenges for managers to coach, to deliver feedback, to set clear goals. It was just not working for our people, was the big
Mhm.
thing, and the way that we work.
When you were looking at that this wasn't working, what did you start exploring? What led you to start kind of going down the path you eventually took?
Yeah. Oh, we listen to managers and individuals. And one big thing that we would hear from managers when we got to the end of the year was we're also tying this to promotion justifications. And a lot of times they're saying, I know this person's ready. I'm just having trouble getting feedback to support it. I'm not getting good
Yeah.
feedback. And so we wanted to, of course, help there for sure.
Yeah. I
Of course,
think even with the project nature, right? Like if for some reason the most recent project maybe wasn't going well, and yet they crushed the first two or three projects they
yeah,
did throughout the year,
yeah,
there's sort of that recency bias of
exactly.
right, and that
Exactly.
I guess that could probably either deflate or inflate someone's sort of promotion
Yeah.
readiness justification. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. If that most recent project someone crushed, chances are if it was close to the annual review cycle, their feedback's probably going to be really positive, despite maybe
Yeah.
having some challenges earlier in the year.
Yeah.
So again, yeah, the recency bias played a significant role. So it's like, well, why don't we just, if we know that's about the time frame that someone can really remember and share good feedback about someone's performance, why don't we just make that our time frame? Why don't we not do one huge thing at the end of the year, and let's do four small conversations across the entire year,
Yeah.
which is ultimately where we landed with an approach called quarterly conversations. And they're designed to be that. They're designed to be in the flow of work. They're designed to be aligned to our project cadence and project cycles,
Hmm.
and they're aligned to also not be an additional thing that a manager or a leader and their team have to do and set aside time for. We sure hope that we all have regular one-on-ones with our managers and with managers
Yeah.
with their direct reports, and just use those already existing conversations to do this. Bring in feedback, and use them to coach around that feedback on a quarterly basis. And so that's what we've done.
Are there elements of what feeds into the quarterly conversation that's baked into the sort of project execution process now? I guess is right because or would people mostly have one project a quarter, or might they be in
Yeah, no, good
multiple?
question.
Or
So individuals might be across multiple projects within a
yeah.
quarter, and sometimes they're much longer than a quarter. Sometimes they're much shorter, and this has been effectively a 3-year journey for us.
Okay.
So maybe we start back there, and I can get to kind of where we are now. In that when we launched it, the initial idea was, look, once a quarter, you should be having a career focused and feedback and coaching focused conversation with your manager at least once a quarter. And we're going to start now. So this quarter, have a conversation about your goals. Have a conversation about what areas you want to develop. Build an IDP. Let's do these things, and shared a number of resources, of course, to help with that.
Hmm.
But that was the idea. Let's just start with something very basic. And we did 2 quarters of that, and then we did a third quarter where we said, okay, we're going to now layer one more thing on top of this. We want everybody in the organization, as if this were the annual review, we want you to solicit feedback from peers that are on your projects. And we have a platform that can support us in this. But so everyone, we shared prompts for how they should do it, tied to our what we call development models, but our competency models, so that they can solicit feedback directly to the things that they're trying to focus on and directly
Hmm.
to their projects. And then we did that for 2 quarters. So now we've got a year basically where we've embedded this idea that we believe as a company this has to happen at least once a quarter. Now we also believe that it should be tied to real-time feedback from your work and from your day-to-day. And the following year we said we're not doing annual reviews anymore. So that year we did have an annual review.
Yeah.
The next year we said we're not going to do that. It's going to look different. We want you to have 4 quarters of quarterly conversations with feedback tied into them.
Hmm.
And at the end of the year, all of that's already documented. You've got everything you need to just roll it into one final, what we call capstone conversation for the year. But you don't have to go chase all your peers down. We're not going to send out a huge review form. We may still collect performance ratings to drive other initiatives within the organization, but we know now those performance ratings aren't just based on what we can remember from
Yeah.
Q4. They are
Right.
There's a paper trail, if you will, to get us to whatever that final rating might look like. And now where we are today is we have and are infusing what we call project-based feedback cycles into our quarterly conversations. So
Cool.
really, really simple way to help automate and operationalize and scale. Really quick way for people to deliver feedback to each other once a project ends, and then that drives the quarterly conversation.
Cool. So whose accountability is it during the project cycle to provide feedback? What's that look like?
Yeah, I mean everyone's effectively.
Okay.
So the feedback form goes to everyone on the project, and let me pause also there and say I recognize if you are super skeptical, which you might be, or cynical, you might be thinking, well, wait a second, you're telling me you basically just took what you did once a year and you're now asking people to do it 4 times a year or for every
Uh,
project?
I will cross that off the questions I was about to ask. Go ahead. Yeah.
And in a way, you would be right. Our what we're trying to do is connect feedback to the flow of work. We know our people want more feedback. We know we need to make it easier for them. And this is at least the way right now and this will evolve for sure, but this is the way right now we think we can do that and make it simple and scalable. The feedback we've gotten from our people who have gone through this project process are that it's really simple. They would much rather do this 5, 6, 7 times a year than one annual review. We make it.
Why?
It's well, I think part of the challenge is it's really easy to give and share feedback with people when it's really fresh.
Yeah.
I think part of the challenge is we get to the end of the year and people feel pressure to deliver really solid feedback, and they can't, and so they don't. Because they can't remember. So if we can do it in the flow of the project, we know that people are way more willing to engage in it and have more effective feedback that they can share with each other.
Yeah.
It's also really simple. There's, basically a single question that's like
Oh,
effectively,
okay.
what advice would you have for this person if you were to work with them on a project again? Which that sort of turn of phrase there also takes a little bit of pressure. It's like, well, it's not feedback, it's advice. And we've seen so far that individuals are much, much more likely to engage with it.
Huh.
So
So
yes,
does
it's
everybody?
4 times, but
Okay, but so does everybody fill it out for everybody on the project, or how is that being sorted out?
yeah. So mechanically, everyone is invited to. We know that not
Okay.
everyone works that closely with each other,
Okay.
and we also know that everyone plays a different role on that project. So
Yep.
there is a question specific to someone's leadership efficacy if they are a project lead
Okay.
versus a what we might call a maker at Huge. If their questions, their form might look a little bit differently. But
Okay.
yes, everyone's invited. You can decline a feedback request if you didn't work with that person, and we
Yeah.
actively encourage folks to do that. If they didn't work together, you don't give feedback, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Is there a minimum expectation of how many you do need to accept and give, or have you run into
we
that
haven't run
issue
it.
at
Yeah,
all? Of
it's a good
yeah.
question. We haven't run into it yet. This part of it is relatively new still,
Okay.
so we're still sort of testing, if you will, and collecting feedback about the process. It's been really positive thus far, though.
Cool.
Yeah.
So how have you? All right, so let's go to the elephant in the room,
Yeah.
right? Which is the tie into merit slash whatever language people use,
Mhm.
merit slash salary
Yeah.
increases and bonus slash incentive payouts. How have you um, decoupled or recoupled, or how have you
Yeah.
adjusted that with this new process?
I'm really glad you asked because we historically we were really adamant at one point about decoupling our review process, feedback and coaching, and our merit increase process and our merit increase cycles. Reason being, we want the conversation about growth and your performance from the past year to be
Mhm.
separate from a conversation about your compensation increase or your compensation. And we are effectively looking at making a complete 180 there, and
Okay.
reconnecting those things. again, because of the response from our people, that it felt clunky. If they're disconnected, then why are you asking us to do this thing? And what are you using that data for? And
Right.
are they
And then
really
I guess
disconnected?
how are you making the merit decision then if it's not
Exactly.
connected?
Exactly.
Okay.
And so we are.
Well, what did you try that you've decided isn't quite what you wanted or what you were hoping for?
Sorry, ask that again.
Well, so it sounds like you had decoupled it.
Yep.
So how did you determine in that year how to handle merit increases that now you've decided maybe not what we wanted exactly, and
Yeah.
we're putting them back
So
together?
they were coupled in the sense that performance ratings still drove initial merit increase recommendations and those types of
Yep.
things.
Yep.
We decoupled the conversation to try to separate those concepts. And
Got it.
I
Okay.
don't, and I don't want to speak on behalf of our chief people officer, chief talent officer, but we don't necessarily believe that is right anymore. That in fact, these things do drive one another. Let's
Right.
be transparent and honest about those things, and also ensure that people know what to expect from it. If you've had these types of quarterly conversations and your ratings look like this at the end of the year, you should expect this type of increase or bonus or whatever it might be. And so we're looking now at we're in the middle of this process now, so that's why I still
Right.
say we're kind of looking at it, but
Sure.
bringing those things back together.
Okay. So for the listener, I think I had thought you completely decoupled, meaning
Mm,
technically too, not just the conversations, right? Like that the ratings, information, performance, information coming out of those was divorced. But what I'm hearing you say is we tried to separate the
conversation.
conversations, not
Sorry.
necessarily the technicalities, so to
Right.
speak. So,
Yep.
okay. Got it. Yeah. And which, right, I would say now, having worked in organizations where we're only doing the annual thing, I've always said from my roles, either within talent management or leadership development, that, well, if you're having regular conversations, nothing should be a surprise in the
Exactly.
year end. But I would say you're relying on leaders knowing, and how am I trying to put this? It's a hope, and I'll just be honest about it. It's a hope and a prayer, right? Around like, well, what percentage of leaders are actually going to do that?
Yeah.
Because life is messy and there's a lot of work in front of us. And
Yes.
there is something about the good, bad, or otherwise, there is something about the process driven, HR process driven eventizing of it
Yep.
that makes people pay attention and do it. A very quick parallel: when I was doing, we were trying to pull peer coaching groups together. This is a long time ago in my very first HR role, and we would say, all right, now you all, here's your coaching group, and this is how often you should meet, and here's some
Mhm.
agenda stuff. And I started checking in with people a few months later. I was like, how are the peer coaching groups going? And they were like, what? I was like, what do you mean? What do you mean? What? All this material that we put in front of you and told you
Yes.
to go do. And he just said, hey, listen, Kent, when the invite comes from you, I pay attention and I'll attend it.
Yeah.
Right. So learn some lessons that,
That's
are
exactly
for
right.
another day, another interview on, but the parallel being like, there is something about it being process driven that gives accountability, again, good, bad, or otherwise, gives accountability to making it happen or making sure it happens.
Yeah, and that's been part of our goal here too. Is like let's create a system and a process that doesn't allow for work to get in the way of that conversation
Yeah.
because it's just part of the work. It's part of the day to day. It's just the next thing that happens. I mean, there's some sort of utopian system here where it's like there's nothing. And we've kicked it around this idea of like a fully open growth architecture at Huge, where it's like there's no systems, there's nothing. It's just like our people just do it, and it's like maybe that'll happen, but work's
Yeah.
going to get in the way. Work will get in the way, and this right now, at least for us, is a way that we can ensure it doesn't or help it not get in the way, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, so I want to come back because I know you had already said it, but again, I could imagine a scenario where employees feel like, well, now, let's talk about employees and then we can talk about managers, right?
Yeah.
There's a scenario where I could see employees being like, well, now I'm doing this 4 times a year. But you
Yeah.
said that you're actually getting really good feedback about it from your employees. So what are
Yeah.
you hearing? What are you hearing from employees that's reinforcing, for you all to keep going down this path? And I'd be curious what's some of the feedback. I know you're recoupling the performance, the merit conversation, but what are some of the other pieces of feedback that um, you're churning over on, kind of, because I take it from our conversation and knowing you that you have this kind of continuous improvement mindset, right? So
Yeah.
like nothing's ever done and dusted. Everything can
Yeah.
always be evolved and better. So let me restate my question, which is,
Okay.
what are you hearing from employees that's reinforcing that you're going down the right path? What other things are you kind of kicking around continued evolution?
Yes. And as you were asking the question, I was trying to pull up a couple of messages I have on Slack from a few folks I'd reached out to after their project feedback cycle wrapped up, because I know that they are cynical and skeptical. And I mean,
Always good to enroll those people and give them your
right?
feedback. Yeah.
Exactly. And so one of them, I'll read directly. I like it. It's faster and easier than trying to remember what you did with someone 7 months ago. And especially for some people, the number of requests that you get around the end of the year pile up, and each ends up taking much longer. Um,
Mm,
and so again, yes, this individual might have to do this a few more times, but because of where it is in the flow of work, it's faster because they remember, it's all fresh, it's right there.
yeah.
And the form that we're asking them to complete as part of it is really, really small and simple.
Yeah.
So what's next is feedback collection. It's like I would
Mhm.
love to say, well, I've already got the next iteration of this in my head, and honestly, I so for the first time in a long time, and this is probably not necessarily a good thing that it's for the first time in a long time. I don't. I and I say that is a good thing because it gives us completely free, open space to figure out what works with it and what doesn't, because we're kind of, at least in my my perspective, we're kind of in uncharted territory here for
Sure. Yeah.
us and probably for a lot of organizations. So not knowing if we're gonna, steer left or steer right or just keep going straight with it is, I think, a really good thing in this moment. And I'm excited to see how as we really start to collect more and more feedback about the process and see how and if it's working. Like, is it actually doing what we believe it is intended to do? And truly, it is intended to do is serve our people, to ensure that they are getting regular, real feedback and coaching in the moment and in their day to day,
Yeah.
versus serving the organization to collect data for whatever reason.
Yeah.
So we're in a cool space now where we get to see, and like, does this work? And if it doesn't, we can start to course correct from there and figure out what
Yeah.
is the next iteration.
Yeah. Nice. Um, so I want to reflect something back. So when it comes to the employee, right, and every manager is an employee too, but so when you're wearing the
Sure.
employee hat,
Yeah.
it sounds like it's actually the same amount of work for the employee. It's just spread out over the course of the year, especially when it comes to collecting peer feedback, right? So to your point, instead of getting 17, 20, 30 requests at the end of the year that I now want to do it, right?
I
But
do want to do
where am
it.
I finding the time? And like, I barely remember this person, right?
Yeah.
Or barely remember that project. It's probably the same amount of work. It's just spread out over 12 months instead of
It's
all
exactly.
in one or two. Um, and then but I would imagine it's a little, you are asking for four. Now I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth here for a second, which is
Okay.
you're asking for, four semi-official conversations to happen instead of
Mhm.
one for
Mhm.
managers. Um, that said, the leadership development and coach in me says they should be having these conversations this often, regardless, right?
Mhm.
Like you should be having a career conversation, a development conversation, probably quarterly anyway. Like if
Mhm.
you really want to, nobody, I show me the person who wakes up not wanting to truly be a good leader who's in a leader role. Whether or not they can fulfill it is another question. But like, if you really want to be a good leader, you should be doing that anyway, right?
Mhm.
So I just wanted to get that out of there when I say the question. But you are asking them to have now this official conversation 3 more times, or kind of 4 more times, especially if there's like a summative. So
Yeah.
what's the feedback been from managers?
Uh,
I know we covered it, but to me, it's a
yeah.
lot. It's a late in the week and late in the day, and my brain is
Not at
big.
all. Yeah. No, again, generally positive. It is generally
Yeah,
positive. Like I won't sugarcoat it and say like, no, it's not that. Right. It is
yeah,
that. And we say that out loud. Like, yes, we are asking you to do this 4 times. Here's why. Here's what we believe. Here's the vision we have for this and where we're trying to go. And I won't say that we don't get some, you know, rolled eyes and pushback
sure,
and at the same time the feedback is generally positive that yes, I believe and understand why we're
yeah,
doing this and that this is the right thing for our people.
yeah.
Yeah.
I would imagine that from some leaders, I would hope. Let me say that the optimist in me would hope you're also hearing this is actually making my ability to be a good leader and developer of a person like that much easier.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome.
Definitely.
All right, one more question before I get us into our advice section.
Cool.
Because I've worked for much larger companies where I would argue, Titanic sized, where this would be a massive change from what used to be done. What made Huge a place where you could do this?
See commitment to innovation, iteration, and patience for some of those things culturally.
Yeah,
We are a design, innovation, and technology company. And so that is at the heart of our culture. And there is willingness to create space. If you talk about the why, like what we're trying to do and why, people will, and culturally, you'll get the space to do it
yeah,
until it's still not working and you're not doing anything about it.
yeah,
That's where challenges can come from. But no,
yeah,
it's also we are an organization like many where this was a big change and we still had to be thoughtful and intentional about the change management. We didn't completely overhaul the entire process in Q1 of 2022. It's like, I mean, we are just now, and maybe it was 2023, but we are just now adding the final layer to it. And
yeah,
not all of those layers were planned. Again, this is a bit of let's see how this goes and what else could we do and what's the feedback? How can we make this easier, better, faster, more efficient, but more effective also and more human? Um,
yeah.
so it's been a journey for us as well. We didn't turn the ship left. We immediately. It's got a small rudder.
Yeah, it's exciting. I think you're doing what a lot of HR people, at least that I've come across, would envy and love to be doing. It's
Mm.
awesome.
I mean, it's fun. It's
Yeah.
fun.
All right. Well, let me give us a violent shove into our advice section. So, uh, I always ask the guests to come prepared with at least 2 pieces of advice. One, and so we'll start with, what's your advice for leaders who are listening?
Um, I'm actually going to. This is a bit of a pivot from what I thought I was going to prepare or what I prepared, but I mentioned, you know, we and I think you shared the example of like we ask our leaders to have these conversations on a regular basis, and we give them the tools and the support and the resources to be able to coach their people. But to your point, like what do you mean? What coaching meeting? It's like work gets in the way, and
Yeah.
so my advice is be intentional about not letting work get in the way of leading. Um, Find and create the space to make those things a priority, whether or not it is an organizational behavior or not.
Yeah. Nice. I always say your regular one-on-one is where the best of intentions for development and career conversations go to die.
Yeah.
And I always push people. I say, put it on the calendar.
Hmm.
Calendar it once a quarter.
Oh
Like,
yeah,
you'll make it.
this
You'll make it
one.
happen.
That's
Yeah.
exactly right, and that's effectively what we did. It's like just make
Yeah.
this one about coaching and development. Yeah.
Nice. All right. What's your advice for HR folks as well as leaders who are supporting the growth of other leaders?
You mentioned edge leadership, and that was something that we had kicked around that we were going to talk, one of our leadership programs. And that program is also a driver of this performance management philosophy too.
Mm-hmm.
And so for us, like, and I guess my advice there would be that's a way for us to make it real and not just a resource. So finding ways to make leadership development real and not just a resource. The growth in our leaders and managers doesn't come just from the toolkit or the training. It happens in the practice and in the conversations and in the times that we fail at doing those things. So how do we design our culture? How do we design our leadership development initiatives to meet that reality? And I guess that's the ending. My advice with a question probably isn't the best thing, but maybe I will.
Yeah. Anything else? Any parting thoughts as we're winding down here?
This was a great conversation. And I so appreciate it. I don't know that I've got a parting thought for you. It's
cool.
A terrible way to end.
What about, well, let me ask it this way, and we'll be brief. I know you've got places to be. If other organizations or HR people were interested in going down this path, what would you, as like first kind of steps, what would you recommend the start of their journey be?
Yeah, I've used this analogy about myself before, but I am the type of guy that, like, when I go to an all-you-can-eat buffet, like, I grab the biggest plate I can find and I'm just like dumping everything on it. Like, yeah, I want steak and fish and fried chicken.
Yeah.
And I honestly, when I first stepped into this role, leading our org effectiveness function, that's kind of what I did. I was like, oh, we got so many things I want to do. And so I'm taking this huge plate to the buffet and trying to do everything. And I learned quickly, you can't do it. And that's the approach that we took with these quarterly conversations. It's like, take a much smaller plate to the buffet and just focus your intention on very clear things, and not all the things.
Nice. There it is. You heard it here, folks. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So we will leave it there for the day. Thank you so much, JD. Appreciate it. This was a fun conversation.
This is great. So appreciate it.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Take it easy, everybody.
Yeah.